Ren gave me permission to preach outside of her expectation, knowing that to prepare something from Thursday late afternoon. I was driving home from the Presbyterian office. The phone rang, so I answered it, which is what I do. And I said, "Hello, Ren." And she told me her story, and I said, it was something. This is the first Sunday I haven't been committed to preaching somewhere for several months. And so I had made a reservation to have a Sunday brunch and to just take the Sunday off. So it worked out really well for you and me and for Ren. We hear the word of the Lord this morning from the 45th chapter of Genesis. We're at the end of this wonderful arc of the story of Joseph's life. It's a wonderful story because it illumines something that is essential for us. Because how many of us had never had a bad thing happen in their lives? Just as I thought. And we could get angry, we can seek revenge, we can throw our hands up in despair, we can pull away from people. But Joseph had an internal confidence that was not born of his own strength, but he had dreams and visions, and he clung to those dreams and visions knowing that God had a plan for him. So he got through some awful stuff. And now we're coming to the end of the awful stuff. See, well, isn't he like kind of a ruler over Egypt and in charge of so much, having so much responsibility and authority? Because lots of people have responsibility but no authority. But he had responsibility and authority, so he had real power. Isn't this great? No, there was something even more important. Then Joseph, we hear the word of the Lord. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all those who stood by him. And Joseph cried out, "Send everyone away from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it. And the household of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him. So dismayed were they at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." And they came closer. He said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. God has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry, go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me. Do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, as well as your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have will not come to poverty. And now your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my own mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father how greatly I am honored in Egypt, and that all of you have seen, and all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here." Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, while all his brothers and wept while Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. Here ends the reading of God's word. Thanks be to God for it. It is a very rich word. You can preach a month of sermons at least on this passage. I almost had a moment like this past week, but I'm old enough that I got over myself. But you do something so horrible, so awful, that you can't even say you're sorry. You're struck silent. You're muted with shame. Especially when I was much younger, I'd do something so horrible I couldn't even go up to my mother or father and say, I'm sorry I did this. I'd wait until they found out and confronted me. And the punishment came and all of that stuff. And then finally, after a while, I was able to open my mouth and a sound came out. I'm sorry, Dad. I should have never done that. I understand the brothers and their silence. Imagine. Last week, the lectionary reading of this Genesis passage was the father saying, Jacob saying, go and check on your brothers. And they see him coming from far away. And they conspire to kill him. But Reuben says, let's not kill him. Let's throw him in the pit. We don't want to have blood on our hands. And then Judah says, the Ishmaelites come by. There's a caravan. And let's sell him into slavery. And they got 20 pieces of silver for him. The next time you see your brother, he's a ruler over Egypt. What do you say? Oh, gee, we're really sorry we sold you into slavery. They were in Egypt, not in Florida. In Egypt, that was a horrible thing to do. In the Middle East, amongst human beings, that is a horrible thing to do to someone. It's like killing them, but allowing them to live through the horror. What were they going to say? Well, we were jealous. Okay, then punch me in the nose. We were jealous. Kick me. Push me to the ground. Selling me into slavery. How could we do that? Are we that horrible? The brothers were thinking and they couldn't ask that question because the answer is yes. You are that horrible. You are that broken. You come from such a dysfunctional family that you would consider killing your brother and thinking that the better option is throwing him into a pit. And Reuben, don't think so highly of yourself, because if you had a real voice, if you were really the older brother, you say, no, we can't do this. This is our brother. This is another human being. We can't think about killing him or selling him into slavery or throwing him into a pit. We're not allowed to do that kind of thing because we're human beings. But he didn't have that kind of courage or confidence, because look where he came from. Abraham and Sarah. God had made a promise to them. They couldn't wait on that promise. They had to take agency and do things the way they thought could work out. And there was Ishmael born, and then Isaac. And then Isaac had a favored son, Jacob over Esau, or at least Jacob and his mom thought that he was the favored son, and they conspired against their own husband and father to trick him into giving the blessing to Jacob. And then Jacob favors his son Joseph over all the rest of them by giving him this multicolored coat that doesn't even say wink, wink, Joseph, you're my favorite, but to keep peace in the family, it'll look like I love all of you the same, but you're my favorite. No, he gives him a colorful coat that sets him apart forever. But the dysfunction, in some miraculous way, stops or is worked out through Joseph. Because just before this passage, Joseph plays with his brothers. by saying, oh, you can go, but in the meantime, he's hidden some stolen goods in their stuff, like he's given them grain, but in the grain is the cup, the silver, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, oh, he sets up the innocent Benjamin to take the fall for his brothers. He's working this stuff out. The pain of the brothers. The out of bounds action that has taken place. At this penultimate stage of the Joseph story arc, Joseph is processing. He's at the process of arriving at the moment of grace, receiving it first, and then giving it. He played with his brothers. He committed, well, relatively speaking, a tiny sin. But when we stand before God, it's all the same. We didn't do the right thing, the life-affirming thing. He was at the point of framing his innocent younger brother, the newly favored one, because Jacob doesn't stop being dysfunctional, favoring one over the other. And now Joseph, in some special way, becomes aware of God's grace as he recounts the injustices of his life. The injustice he was about to perpetrate on Benjamin, which was a reaction in response to the injustice of being sold into slavery to his cousins, the Ishmaelites, the ones who issued from Ishmael, the firstborn of Abraham. Not Abraham and Sarah, but the firstborn of Abraham. And then ending up in Potiphar's house and being a good and faithful servant slave. And then the wife accusing him of something that he was not guilty of which he was innocent, and suffering an injustice as a result of that. Being thrown into prison, interpreting dreams of two people, saying, remember me when you are lifted up. They say, yeah, sure, in the injustice of being forgotten in prison. And then being called to interpret an essential vision that allows for life to flourish, because the 7 years of plenty allow for the storage of life-giving foodstuffs, not only for the Egyptians, for all the people in their world at that time. It is by the grace of God that he does this. And he trusts in the dreams and visions that he has, the gift to him. He doesn't study a book to learn how to manage the injustices of life. He has internally a confidence that God has a plan and purpose for his life. And now the brothers come, and Joseph addresses his brothers. They cannot respond. Joseph doesn't say, I forgive you. Joseph says, how is my father? Not how is our father. My Father who art in heaven. My Father. How is my Father? And they can't say anything. Joseph does not forgive and forget. But what Joseph does is instructive for us, because we can't forgive either, can we? We remember good moments. Like the last time I was here for a wedding, and I saw those people together today, and I rejoiced. I also remember other times of stumbling and falling, or other people stumbling and falling on me and hurting me. I remember. But What Joseph does, he offers grace by moving the impediment aside. How is my Father? Look what God has done with my life, so that I can extend life to so many, but especially to you and your children and your children's children. All of you, come here and I will care for you, because God has cared for me and put me in a position where I can affirm life in such a huge and powerful way. He doesn't excuse the behavior. He doesn't excuse the brothers from selling him into slavery. In fact, he says, you did this, but it was part of God's plan. God brought me here. So we're setting this aside, that this will not be an impediment to the wholeness of life, to peace, to shalom, to being whole again. Because even though I am in this exalted position, I love my dad. I want to be with him again, and I want his pain to go away. Because I know he's in pain because his favored son is dead. But not anymore. He'll rejoice again. Oh, this is one. You know how it resonates with Jesus, Joseph's life. Like the father in the prodigal son story. Like being sold into slavery for 20 pieces of silver. He's not as important as Jesus. They got 30 pieces for Jesus, Judas did. That's a joke. You can laugh about that. Joseph addresses his brothers. The brothers are not able to say anything. They're not even able to say they're sorry. But Joseph removes what is between them so that they can, at the end of the story, hug each other and weep. That they might be whole again from this moment on. The brothers are speechless because of their shame and guilt. Joseph addresses that circumstance, and then everybody cries. And when I'm reading this, every time I think of that 8th chapter of Romans, where the Spirit intercedes for us with sighs too deep for words, because there's stuff that I don't know how to articulate. Like standing before God and saying, you know, with all the gifts you gave me, this is all I can offer. I can't say sorry for some of the horrible things that I've done. And I can't understand why all those folks, not people here, all those folks out there do their horrible things, which cause separation and division, which bring death instead of life. Oh, they're complex problems, Ada. No, it's because we can't get over our own selves. But to really articulate what is getting in the way, why I'm holding on to so much while you're so hungry, why I have a vacation home. Oh, you know, I went to the coast this weekend when there's thousands of people in the city where I reside that have no place to live. Oh, it's not just my fault. That's just the way things are. It's better to keep our mouth shut and wait to hear what God has for us to do. They were speechless, and the Spirit intercedes. And Joseph falls upon his brother Benjamin's neck and weeps, while Benjamin weeps on his neck. And then he kisses all his brothers, and they weep. And after that, his brothers talked with him. Joseph states that God sent me here. He does not excuse his brother's sinful behavior. There are other ways to get to Egypt other than to be sold into slavery. There are other ways to be granted authority by the Pharaoh than by being thrown in prison, than being let out to interpret a dream. There's other ways that God could have accomplished the task. The brothers did not have to first conspire to kill him and then to throw him in a pit and then sell him into slavery to the Ishmaelites passing by. That didn't need to happen, but it did. And God's purpose is fulfilled in spite of our behavior that brings brokenness, that leads to death. I think about this with all the stuff that we've done in the past, individually and collectively, all that is lost to sin. I still think that slavery is a sinful action, in spite of what may be said in other places. I think that it is a broken aspect of our human relating to one another, and it is a horrible thing. And I think of all that we have lost because we have kept certain ones on the margin because of the color of their skin, because of gender, because of a whole host of things. We've marginalized, and I think all that we have lost, we who are closer to the center. And what can we do about it? We can't go back to 1842 and say, here you are, have life again. You're free. No, that time is past. What can we do right now is we can do what Joseph did. Well, we can't do it. We can just stand there like the brothers in silence and wait for the one who was on the margin to say, here's a spot, not only at the table, but at the head of the table. And they can move the impediment of shame, of guilt, out of the way by saying, tell my Father that I'm still alive. And then we can shed tears and allow the tears and the hugs, the closeness, the kisses to allow us to feel whole again. But a gracious action has to take place. Grace in life is essential so that from now on, from this day forward, we can act with justice. We can act with justice so that we may live in peace, issuing from the love that we have for one another, that is a reflection of God's love for us. And now I'm going to do the invitation before the music. So now you come to the table. I get weak in the knees and on the verge of tears when I approach the table, because it is even more powerful than what Joseph did with his brothers. Jesus invites us. I don't say I'm not worthy. I am struck dumb with my sin and shame, all that I could have done this past week. Well, it's been 2 weeks since the last time I was at the table. And there is room for everyone because of the grace that is offered, not by Joseph. It's reflected by Joseph. But it is the grace of God that allows life to flourish because of some of the actions we take, like Joseph did, and in spite of some of our actions, like Joseph's brothers did. And in the end, we are made whole. Jacob knows that Joseph is alive and comes to live near him. Joseph and his brothers, starting with Reuben, have relationship again. And you and me, no matter what has gone on between you and me in the past, we approach the table and are bound by God's love in Jesus Christ. come and partake of the gracious gift that is offered in just a moment. Amen.